Okay guys, so we're going to get right into stretching for the glutes. Now I've shown the seated hip stretch before on a previous video, but we're going to get back into it because this is the ultimate regression of the pigeon pose that I'm getting ready to show you two variations of. So to go through it again, the seated hip stretch, I'm going to bring the ankle over top of the support leg. With this hand, I'm going to gently apply pressure, trying to bring the knee or the shin to a parallel position to the floor. From here, I'm going to extend the spine up and straight. And I'm going to start the stretch by pulling my chest forward and into that shin. So once again, if you're starting this stretch and you're too tight, that the angle of your shin does not allow you to get into this stretch, what I would recommend is just focusing on that first part. Apply gentle pressure. Don't push hard. Gentle pressure, and try to start extending the spine. Over time, that range of motion will increase if you do it slowly and take your time. But at some point, we want that leg, the tibia or shin, to be horizontal to the floor. Lift the chest, extend the spine, bring the stretch forward, the chest forward. And you will know when it's time for the next progression, when basically you're almost able to lay that chest down on top of your shin with relative or no discomfort. Okay, moving on. So the next variation of the pigeon, I do on a bench. So if you don't have access to a bench, this could prove to be a little bit difficult. There might be something around your house that you could use, but any bench will basically do. You want to be able to load the leg on top of the bench, and then the other leg is going to be off. So I'm focusing obviously on this guy right here. The same rules will apply as did the seated hip stretch. So I have this leg pulled back almost in the same position as the Belgian split squat. So I have a slight stretch happening on the psoas hip flexor on this side. Now my goal for the leg that's on the bench is it's 90 degrees. That's your goal. It's 90 degrees straight shot. And I want my knee and ankle to be in relative alignment, okay? So if already you're setting this exercise and your knee is higher than it should be, come back to the seated hip stretch. Don't go into this one. But let's say you're ready to go. You can lay that knee down. The shin is laying across the top of the bench. Same rules apply as the seated hip stretch. I'm going to extend and lift the spine, raise my chest, and I'm actually going to use the end of the bench. That's what's so great about this one as opposed to the seated hip. I have a little something that I can use to pull me down a little bit deeper than I could in the seated hip stretch. I'm focusing on this leg, the one that's on the bench, and I'm going to stay there as long as I can possibly handle this stretch. The longer you stay in it, the better the stretch will be. Okay guys, so we've made it to the ultimate progression. I'm down on the floor and we're getting ready to go into pigeon pose. It's going to be pretty interesting because my ass is sore. I can't wait to do some SMR on film. It's going to be hilarious. But I'm starting in what's called a shin box. So if you can tell the angle that I'm in, I'm already starting to set up this front leg, which is the one I'm going to focus the stretch on. This back leg is just kind of cocked out to the side. This is called a shin box, once again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this leg and I'm going to start to position it directly behind this leg. This knee at the end of the stretch will intersect halfway point of this shin. So it looks something like this. I'm going to use both hands and I'm going to start kind of positioning and walking myself into this stretch. So I'm not putting a lot of load on the hip yet. It's mostly on my hands. Now what you can't see is I'm using my back foot. I'm pulling my toe back, which is pulling my hip down to the floor and my leg straighter. So what you can't see, and I'll change my angle a little bit, all right, is I'm taking this back leg and I'm starting to pull, and that is what is loading my body down on top of this front leg. I keep reaching with my back toe, pulling my body back. Now my goal is to simply sit my hip on the floor or as close to it as I possibly can get. So if you get down in this pose and you're already in excruciating pain or you can't even get lower than a vertical chest position or a vertical spinal position, if you can't start working towards the floor, Once again, I would recommend regressing this stretch, spending more time on the bench, and then coming back down to the floor. But the pigeon by far is the ultimate glute stretch. If you're able to get into it, please try. I guarantee you one of these variations will work for you. Okay guys, so I've shown you the Belgian split squat. For some people that can be a really aggressive exercise. It's also hard to set up. Balance can definitely be an issue with that exercise. So I wanted to show you a variation for the hip flexor that's easy to do. All you got to do is get down to the floor, if possible. So what I'm going to do is just set up kind of a lunge position, right? But instead of being on the back foot, I'm going to be on this knee. So I want this leg to start by being relatively horizontal, all right? So I'm just creating some space between the front heel and this back knee. And what I'm going to do is square my hip to this knee and then press the front knee forward over top of the tub, all right? And then dropping the hip down to the floor, pulling my hip forward, extending the spine, lifting the chest, which is something you hear in basically about every stretch that I would personally teach. From here, I'm going to take the arm that is on the back side, and I'm going to cross the front leg, and then just use it to assist me and gently move into a twist. Really simple, very effective exercise to do. Great stretch for the psoas. Okay, so it's time for a little myofascial release. I've got my two favorite objects, my field hockey ball and my rumble roller. I also keep a baseball, a softball, tennis ball. I got a lot of different size utensils that I use for the right job. And I recommend just starting with a field hockey ball, and then maybe you can add to it. But you will find, depending on how big you are, how deep into the tissue you want to get, you want different variations, different size objects will really help you apply self-myofascial release. So what I'm going to do, we're going to get into some glutes here, and I'm going to start with my rumble roller, and I'm very simply going to just sit on it. So we've done a little bit of this already, but I didn't get into the glutes. So the position I'm going to start in, once again, there's my seated hip stretch. Now I'm going to start at the glute medius, which is very high in the top of the butt, and I'm going to rotate a little bit towards that rumble roller and just move the roller around ever so slightly. When I watch video of people rolling, they're just doing this, back and forth. Listen, that shit won't work. What you have to do is put the roller on the trigger point and hold for 30 seconds to 3 minutes. And you want to put as much pressure into that trigger point as you can absolutely sustain. So I'm just kind of moving it around a little bit, and I'm finding where I'm most sore. Now you can rotate left and right. You can load and unload body weight from here, but very basic. Remember, the glute medius is on top, glute max is underneath, okay? So very simple. You can also take that roller, right, and I can move it right to the outside, sit on it once again, extend the legs straight, and start to put a little bit more pressure on that glute max. It's a little lower, it's a little harder to get to with the rumble roller. So because it's so hard to get to, what I'm going to do is get my trusty little friend, the field hockey ball, out, and I'm going to position it right at the bottom of my butt, and I'm going to extend my leg, and I'm going to apply pressure or body weight on that muscle again. I'm going to see if I can find a little trigger point. I'm just moving my hip around slightly, and I'm just putting a little bit of body weight on top of it. I could lay all the way down flat on top of that ball and just gently let my weight fall on it, especially if I find a trigger point in there that's just driving me crazy and I'm dying to get it out. Now I can also get very aggressive and take this little guy and do the same thing we did with the rumble roller. Now if I go about halfway up, somewhere in between my glute max and glute medius, the piriformis is way deep in there. It is underneath the glute max. It is underneath the glute medius. It's a deep muscle, hard to get into. So I'm going to bring that ball right into the center, cross my leg, and sink in. If you can't tell how much this is hurting, you're not looking at the camera or not looking at the video closely enough, because my ass is so sore it's crazy. So leave that guy in there, once again, about 30 seconds to 3 minutes. If you can handle it, once again, you can apply more pressure, just simply laying back on it. You guys out there, and ladies, that got a little bit more soft tissue than others, what's important, especially when we're talking about getting to the piriformis, is we need an object that can get through all that muscle tissue and let's be honest, probably a little bit of fat tissue as well. So we need something that can project deep into the glute. So this may not be the thing that you need to use. You may need to play with something that can get in there a lot deeper, but the same rules apply. Just practice or play around with different objects that'll do the same exact thing for you. Okay guys, so lastly, when it comes to myofascial release on the psoas, very, very difficult to get to once again, because the psoas is actually underneath the abdominal muscle. So what I recommend is, if you're having hip extension issues, go see somebody who has some experience with ART, active release technique, and have them manipulate that psoas. It is very, very difficult to do self-myofascial release with the psoas because it is so deep and you may have difficulty actually finding it. There are some methods. I'm not really going to show them for fear that it may or may not work for you, but what I know will work. Find somebody in your area that is doing active release technique and make an appointment. There is nothing better than having somebody stick their hand 3 inches deep in your abdominal area and help to get the trigger points out of that psoas. You must experience it. I really appreciate you guys watching these. We got a couple more to do. We're going to do a couple on the back. Maybe I can get that whole video done in one segment. And once we get that, you guys are going to have all the tools you need to start loading a bar and a lot of weight on your back. I can't wait. Thanks for watching.